destroy everything in its path, from buildings and, of course, to people. Right? Something to be very respected. All right, so that's a little bit about its geography. Now, in connection with this, you should know that the first people of Japan most likely came to Japan through a land bridge. And we already talked about land bridges way back in September when we talked about the Ice Age, right? And we talked about how people came to the North American continent and they crossed that narrow strip of land that once connected Asia, modern-day Russia, to North America, modern-day Alaska, that Bering Strait there, right? That was once a land bridge. And the reason why is because there was a lot more ice during the last ice age. And all that ice was channeled and kept frozen in the polar regions. Think of it as a big sponge, right? The sponge wound up absorbing all of that water and it held on to it. Right? The sponge would be the ice cap. And then when the temperatures warmed up, the sponge rang itself out and the water levels rose. All right? And so that's exactly what happens with what happens in Japan. They most likely came from north. There's an island up here in modern-day Russia. They most likely came from the mainland over that and then down and into Japan. That is the path they most likely took. All right, but again, this is a long time ago. We're talking about 20,000 years or so ago that we know of right now. So as the sea levels rose, the land bridge disappeared, just like the one between North America and Asia, and they were separated from mainland Asia. All right, and so they were relatively isolated, all right, but not for long. And they're not that far away from mainland Asia. So there is some influence that they will have. All right, so because Japan is relatively new, when we look at geological areas that are new, when they just were formed, there's a lot of mountains. There's not a lot of time for erosion to occur. There's not a lot of time for soil to become enriched. It's very rugged, really rugged. And so Japan is a really rugged place. Especially in the center of Japan, you have the alpine central regions of Japan. And because of this, there's not a lot of farmland, not a lot of good farmland. And what we know about past chapters is when farmland is scarce, or any farming land in particular, power comes with control over the food supply. All right, and that's what happens in Japan. The power will come from the food supply, and it becomes smaller, at least farmland. That's a reason why the Japanese, still to this day, have a very high fish diet. They go to the seas to feed their people because they don't have enough farmland to feed everybody, right? And so back in the medieval and early Japanese time period, same thing occurred, but the farmland was still extremely important, and the people who held on to it were very powerful. Who were those people? The early Japanese were divided into smaller kingdoms, if you will, controlled by in this case, a chief. We call them clans, many different clans. Kind of like a king, I suppose, but in this case we call them a clan led by a chief. The most powerful of those early clans is going to become the Yamato. And these people will wind up taking over and controlling most of Japan, and they have quite a big prestige behind them because they are the most powerful. And so the people of Japan believe that there's something behind this, and they start to believe that they are maybe descendants of gods. In this case, they believe that the chief of their clan was descendant of the sun goddess, and so people start to believe in this, and that becomes kind of cemented within their culture, and they start the line of the emperors. All right, so the first emperor of Japan comes from the Yamato clan, and continues. Japan's emperor will, as time goes on, become more influential and have more control over all of Japan, until at one point he will be given all of the land in Japan. So the emperor will control all of the land, and he will divide the land up amongst his supporters. Sounds kind of familiar, right? We talked about kings and lords and ladies and how they would get land if they paid homage to their kings. This is a system of feudalism. Japan also practiced feudalism, even though they didn't get this from one another. They just developed it on their own, and they developed it in a similar way, along similar lines. All right, and so we'll talk about the social hierarchy and things like that later. All right, and so last thing I want to end with was some of the early influences on Japan. All right, and so what you need to know is that Japan sits to the east of Korea and also to the east of China. All right, and because of this, they're somewhat close in proximity to Korea and to China. Because of that, they are influenced more greatly from these two countries. And we see that within their culture still to this day. And so some of those elements are their writing system. All right, they develop a system of writing that was highly based off of the Chinese writing system that involves pictographs and ideographs, like we learned about in ancient China. So similar symbols and pictographs are used in their writing system. They will also develop certain customs that are influenced by China. For example, Confucius. All right, we know that Confucius starts in China. Well, Confucius and his teachings and influence don't stop at the border of China. These ideas continue beyond China, and they go in the surrounding areas. And one of the areas they get to is Japan. And so Japan will develop a very Confucian-like society based off of the principles of Confucianism within their own country. Buddhism is also going to be adopted by China and then work its way into Japan, and the Japanese will accept it. And they will modify it to meet their own needs because remember, and we're going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow, they practice a form of what is called Shinto, which is a belief in nature spirits. So it's a little bit of Shintoism and it's a little bit of Buddhism. So what do we call it? Shinto Buddhism. There we go. Real original. All right, good. And they also adopt certain philosophical ways of thinking. Like I said, one of those things would be Confucianism. They also respect and revere nature, maybe a little bit from China, but a lot of it is inherently on their own. And for now, I think that'll do. So make sure you guys continue to do your work. Those of you missing your assignments or missing tests or quizzes, please turn them in. All right, we're getting close to the end here. All right, don't mess it up now. So there'll be one more test. Try to get 2 more quizzes in and a few homework assignments. So continue to do your work. Proud of you guys. Hang in there. We're almost done, and I'll see you for the next one. All right.